The one thing that I really love about Jorvik and the original lore is that even now, after 18 years, there's still things to discover and secrets to uncover. Trust me, there is nothing that I love more than finding something truly unique and rare from this world that barely anyone knows exists. Whether that be exclusive information, or character sheets, or images, or alternative character designs. So much so that I like to refer to this process as a treasure hunt. And today, I want to share some of my most interesting treasures with you. To start off, as most of you probably know, the original Starshine Legacy and Star Academy games both had their respective comics. These comics only consisted of 2 volumes, and to this day we have no idea how the comics were supposed to end, or why they ended at all. Well, Hidden Entertainment had these information sheets on their website, which honestly are treasures on their own with exclusive concept art and information. And in the Starshine Legacy sheet, we can also see a comic page from the never-released 3rd volume of the comics. The page contains a conversation between Lisa and Anne and introduces us to Anne's new love interest, Gareth, who seemingly is a double agent. It's really a shame that they stopped after 2 comics, because it looks like they were just getting started. And this Gareth character, yeah, I want to know more about him. And while we're on the topic of comics, did you know that there also used to be comics covering gaps in the SSO lore? And no, I'm not talking about the Instagram comics that were recently discontinued, but some actual physical comics released in around 2017-2018-ish. The most well-known one is definitely the one called Clouds Over Silverglade, which was a dark and action-filled comic with Alex and Maya being the main characters. Since the plot is so long, I'm not gonna go into detail about it. However, it contains key moments such as Lisa's disappearance, Alex meeting Maya and becoming friends with her, Linda getting kidnapped by the Baroness and Godfrey, and lastly, our character arriving in Jorvik. It's a great comic to read if you want to know what happened leading up to SSO, and the only important event that it doesn't contain is Anne's disappearance. I will be leaving links in the description, so if you're interested, make sure to check it out. But in addition to Clouds Over Silverglade, there was something called the Star Stable magazine. This was a series of magazines released only in a few countries, and it contained a lot of behind-the-scenes information, special promo codes, concept art, fan pages, and also short comics. Since this is such a rare thing and it was only released in a handful of countries, I have no idea how many editions of this magazine were actually released in total, but I have been able to collect a total of 5 comics. One is about Rania, showing the moment she lost her eyesight and how she came to terms with it. Although it's not clear exactly what happened, she lost her sight while picking berries on her own, and the doctors were unable to do anything. She quickly grew scared and depressed, not knowing how to deal with the blindness, but her mother refused to let her despair. This is when she met Dellinger, an injured workhorse who risked being put down, and the two instantly felt a connection. As time passed, the two of them became soulmates, and suddenly Rania's blindness was no issue, cause Dellinger was her eyes. Another comic is about Madison, and this one seems pretty random in my opinion. After having saved Night Dust, Madison imagines herself as a main character in Knights of Anistria. We follow this wild journey down her imagination, and next thing you know, this is everything she talks about. There's also one comic about Tan and Loretta and how they became friends. A young Tan, or Tatiana, which is her real name, leaves Russia to attend the Jorvik equestrian camp, and this is where she meets Loretta. Tan isn't all too fond of Loretta, as she keeps blabbering about herself around the clock. And one day, when they all go out for a trail ride, Tan leaves the group to get some peace and quiet. Her venture takes a dangerous turn when she meets a bear in the Fairgrove forest, falls off the frightened horse, and has to hide in a cave. Tan thinks that she's toast until Loretta comes to the rescue and scares the bear away. They have a bonding moment before heading back to the stables, in which Loretta's parents and Thomas are furious. In any case, the adventure led to a lasting friendship between the two, and they stayed in touch even after Tan went back to Russia. One comic is about Rhiannon and her journey towards becoming a wild whisperer. She meets Fripp and Elizabeth in the Secret Stone Circle, who question whether or not she could possibly be the new Soul Rider of the Lightning Circle. She discovers that she has a different kind of bond with the horses, as she starts hearing their voices in her head, and they lead her to Nyx, a Starbreed, who she bonded with in an instant. Upon returning to the Secret Stone Circle, Fripp can tell her that she is a wild whisperer, and this soon becomes her life purpose. There's also one comic taking place in Idris' circus, featuring a creature named Trixie. Basically, Trixie stumbles upon the circus in search of a life purpose, and upon witnessing all the horses of Jorvik, she decides she wants to be a horse. Idris thinks this is a bad idea, and would rather make her a ballerina. Upon further research, she eventually finds the perfect compromise and becomes a horseback dancer. By the way, if anyone by any chance knows about more of these Star Stable magazines, then please do hit me up on Instagram or Discord or anything, because I'm very much interested. Next, I wanna show you this. You may have seen this image, but never really known where it originates from. Well, this is the first ever Star Stable advent calendar, and sources disagree on when it was first released. Some say 2008, some say 2010, and I cannot for the life of me find the original source. But anyway, the calendar would give you a Jorvik lore sheet every day from December 1st until Christmas Eve. And while some of these lore sheets have been shared a lot in the community, others are less known. For example, this one that features an alternative design for disco, the ones about Jorvigian horses, or literally any sheet that contains information on side characters. I personally find this one with Buck pretty funny. Moving on, I want to present to you one of the biggest mysteries I have encountered in the original lore. This is the Russian cover of Star Academy Episode 3, Breakthrough, featuring a completely unknown character. I was so mind blown when I first found this, because this guy has never been seen in the games, not in the comics, never been mentioned anywhere, and there's no hint to who he is. And yet somehow he has made it to the front cover of the game. Like, who is this guy? He looks a lot like Lilith. Is it her brother? Is it her father? Is it her original dance partner? We need some answers. In my desperate search of this guy's identity, I reached out to a bunch of former employees at Hidden Entertainments and asked them if they had any information about this whatsoever. Sadly though, the general response was that this is a long time ago and they cannot remember. However, there was one person who worked as an artist on the first Star Academy comic, and she could at the very least give me a little push in the right direction. Although she didn't have knowledge about the full story, from what she could recall, she was fairly certain that the character was a scrapped alternative design for the male antagonist, which is Lance. It's almost hard to believe because the two designs are so vastly different from one another, but she assured me that this had to be the case, and that they simply put the wrong design on the cover. In any case, having asked several former employees without any luck, this is as close as a confirmation as we will ever get. This is Lance as he was originally intended. Can you imagine how different of a character he would be if they went with this design? But I guess they figured at some point in the process that they needed a handsome high school jock instead. Okay, so here's a fun fact that I think many may have heard of, but it's still such an interesting piece of backstory that I wanted to include it regardless. Although he never mentions them in SSO, Herman has two brothers. The first one is Coyote, who moved from Jorvik to the USA in his younger years and got into western riding and rodeo. He became a competent rider within the field, however, following a rodeo accident, he was unable to continue. This led him to move back to Jorvik and continue his passion by starting his very own western ranch, named after himself. By design and backstory, Coyote is assumed to be the eldest of the brothers. Herman's other brother is only known as Mr. Wetton, and he is assumed to be the youngest of the three. Although his first name is unknown, his last name Wetton is assumed to also be the last name of Herman and Coyote, since, you know, they're brothers. And also unmarried. Anyway, Mr. Wetton is known as the owner of the Blacklight nightclub and record label located in Jorvik City, and he also served as a manager for Lisa's old band, the Flaming Quartet. Personally, I love to see the lore of the different games cross over in each other, so these three characters as a set really intrigues me. I would also really like to know what Mr. Wetton's first name is. And speaking of brothers and crossovers, I could also quickly mention here that Mario at the observatory is the brother of Maurice Bergen, the headmaster of Star Academy. This means that Mario's full name is Mario Bergen. We can also talk a little bit about Alex's origins, because it's actually surprising how much we know about Alex's background compared to the other Soul Riders. As we all know, James is her little brother who she is very protective of. But in addition to James, she also has 3 unnamed older brothers. As a side note, I should probably mention here that this fact is actually retconned in the Soul Riders books, where Alex is the oldest of the bunch. However, the books can also not be considered canon anymore, so make of that what you will. Besides, I do personally think that the original version with 3 older brothers makes more sense, considering that James is the only one of her brother that she's protective of. And I feel like her having 3 older brothers may also have contributed to her tomboy personality. Anyway, Alex and her siblings grew up in the infamously poor neighborhood of Jorvik City, called Crow's Nest. This is the very same neighborhood where Kevin from Star Academy grew up, as well as Raptor. Again, I absolutely love when the lore from the different games can cross over in each other, so I find this in particular a very interesting fact to think about, because all of them being from the same neighborhood would mean that they most likely, at least to some degree, know each other since childhood. This last thing I want to mention is just a funny observation and not so much lore, but I want to mention it anyway. It's no secret that a lot of assets were reused back in the old days, which is very understandable when they're just trying to decorate the environment. But if you look in the trophy cabinet in Jorvik High, you'll notice that every single diploma has the name Dylan on it. Like I said, this is likely due to reused assets and has nothing to do with the story, but I find this a pretty funny detail nonetheless. Apparently, Linda had some tough competition to become an honor student, because damn Dylan! Honestly, I wasn't really sure what kind of things I should add to this list, because I feel like in some niche parts of the community, people already know all the original lore and all of that stuff. So these were pretty much all the minor details that I could think of that most people haven't noticed or haven't realized. I find all of these things especially interesting anyway, so that's why I made a list of them. So I want to know your opinions on this kind of stuff. Do you think that this kind of lore is actually interesting? Do you think any of it is still canon? And what would you like to know more about? Leave some comments down below, leaving your opinions. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, if you did, I'll see you around. Bye!